Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are continuing a Skyrim playthrough in which I play as a Nordic battle mage. My character is essentially a warrior, but I do recognize the value of certain magics like alteration for defensive capabilities and some of the perks, as well as restoration for the ability to have yourself healed as one of the best means of survival, in addition to your armor rating. One thing I think that is interesting about this series, maybe it's just a reflection of the way the gameplay works, is that my character is a Nord, and he ends up becoming very good at magic. Now, maybe it's just because he's a dragonborn and it's a spirit of Akatosh, and that's why he chooses to dominate the field of magic. But, that's rather unusual for Nords, because you did have a lot of Nords like Shalador and just some of the ancient Nords that were wise men, clever men. They knew how to use magic. However, generally, it's more so like the Dragon Priest cult. Like, I think Ajidal was the first one to do enchanting outside of the Elven world. So, I think it says something interesting about the Elder Scrolls and the way it works, because if in this case the gameplay reflects the way the world works, then Nords almost kind of have to adapt and use magic if they actually want to have a chance, despite the competitive disadvantage they have with elves if they have to war with like the Thalmor in the future, because magic is just very powerful, and not having magic, I guess, in the world, you might say legendary difficulty, for example, or any of the harder difficulties are not even canon. But let's say that the world is as gritty and tough as it is in legendary difficulty and the way it's balanced. What chance do you have of being like a warrior and surviving long or accomplishing anything? Because, you have to have like mercenaries, and you have to have a soldiery that is capable of taking on different normal threats like bandits. Maybe you have like magically inclined bandits. There are like monsters that are good at magic. You might have liches or powerful sorcerers, creatures, Daedric summons. What chance do people in Skyrim, for example, have if they've got a magically inclined enemy that is so good that they could just summon massive fireballs and hordes of undead, and it would just be a meat grinder? I think this is why shouts were a big thing for the Nords back in the day, and it was their Sigic form of tonal magic. Like the Dwemer, they used tonal magic with like chimes and tonal architecture, and they wanted to manipulate the fundamental essence of the Arbus, which they described as a song with rhythm. So I do think each of the different nations in the Elder Scrolls have their own forms of magic. Like the Redguards had sword singing, which was kind of like a spirit-based magic that was really effective with swords. And then they had the stone wizards, and that whole fiasco destroyed their continent. I think each of them has some kind of gimmick up their sleeve that would give them kind of like an ace in the hole advantage if one other country decided to like completely like invade and take over. Although we see things can go awry in certain cases. I mean, the Iliads, of course, lost their whole homelands, and it's a matter of debate if any still exist now, or if they assimilated into other countries like the way the Akaviri did in Cyrodiil. But in the case of the Snow Elves, for example, you can make a good argument that they really didn't do that much to deserve the level of like conquest and destruction of their cities that the Nords were capable of inflicting. So it is a real and present concern that such things can happen. There were untold like Nedic tribes that got exterminated under the Iliad rule. And then there are other cases like the Argonians, who they have the advantage of their land being so hostile to other like countries that those countries can't really invade. For example, the Septim Empire kind of had a nominal hold that was like coastal, and they controlled Blackwood, but they never really controlled the interior of the Argonian lands. The Dunmer could, of course, enslave some of the Argonians, maybe in the northern parts, but their landscape, their connection to the Hist, and the abilities of the Hist that exceed elven or human capacity, that's something I think that has saved them. But it's just kind of crazy, like, Ysgramor, you might say, was a demigod, a Shezarine. And you've had such great warriors. You've had the tongues, like I said, that were dragon speaking. They were speaking the dragon language, and it had tremendous power to break down walls and sever continents. Maybe some of this is just like mythopoeia, or you could call it just like folklore, and it could be symbolic, but in the Elder Scrolls, you also got to realize the ridiculous things you read about, they're not usually just metaphorical, they are indeed literal. So now we see a time where you've got somebody like Ulfric Stormcloak. He has the ability of the Thum, and it's proven in game. And then you got the Greybeards who know how to use the Thum. Who else that is not a dragonborn or a draugr actually knows how to use a Thum in Skyrim? I mean, Tiber Septim tried to institute a school for the Thum in, I believe, Markarth, when he was the emperor. But it didn't really have a continued tradition, and something about the Greybeards and the loss at Red Mountain kind of ended the tradition of the tongues. All this is to say that the Thum, when readily practiced, the lore version of it is extremely powerful. You could see this with the way the Greybeards, even in game, just combined, they can destroy you. They're level 150, and they can just overwhelm you typically with the power of their Thum. So, if nobody has the Thum, and you're dealing with some Thalmor soldiers, what's to stop them from shooting a lightning bolt in your heart from like 300 feet away? And what are you going to do? You're going to take your little arrow and you're going to shoot them? Again, the gameplay does not equate to the lore, because in real life, if you do take a longbow and you lodge it into some guy with robes on, he really should die almost right then and there. Problem is, with the way the elves are with magic and their manipulation of the Arbus, what's to stop them from summoning Daedra in his stead, or raising him from the dead, or somehow having, alteration magics like I've shown, and restoration magics that are really effective right in the moment of just stopping that damage to save his life. I mean, lore-wise, we don't know the absolute upper limits of what would be, a fatal wound. But let's say, for example, even in the gameplay, stopping a fatal wound. In the gameplay, you have an arrow that shoots you, and you're on very hard, legendary difficulty, and it takes away like 3/4 of your health. Well, I have a really good healing spell. I don't have a good alteration spell because I didn't study that, because I only studied useless magics with my liberal arts College of Winterhold degree. So what I do is I cast this spell. It's like a master level restoration spell, and then I have full health again, and I've got really good willpower and magic regeneration. Shoot me with that arrow again. Do it. Yeah, your heart, my heart, it's been totally mended ever since you shot it with that arrow. So that's how, giving an analogy, I mean, things that should be instantaneously fatal in the real world, maybe they are not so in the way the Elder Scrolls is. I mean, I wouldn't put some of like the assembled armies of like the Thalmor and the Aldmeri Dominion in their kind of fervor and extremism past doing anything, such as getting involved with the Necromancer's Moon or the Slode, who I understand were traffickers of souls with the ideal masters. I mean, these are sinister and like underhanded ways of doing things, one of the dark sides of magic, but there are a lot of ways you could like assemble armies of replaceable undead or souls, or I believe that the Iliads, or it might be possible through some sort of flesh magic to put a soul back into the body of a mortal, or not a mortal, but maybe more like a golem style construct. So that would be kind of like an interesting, if concerning, way of doing it, because I understand that you can certainly do that with Daedric essences. The TLDR of this whole discussion on like the viability of magic versus melee is that, sure, you got stealth, that's viable, but if you want to be a stealth guy because you're not good at magic, it's kind of like you really have to be good at stealth. Well, what if you're really burly and muscular and you, every step you take, the wooden floor creaks? That's a problem. And I just don't see like a whole country of people adapting their strategy. I mean, Nords are known to use some ambush tactics. That's supposed to be part of their culture, but I mean, they don't have the best advantage as far as like guerrilla warfare. I think, like I've said, the Argonians might have a good advantage with terrain. I think that there might be some acrobatic advantages of the Khajiit in some of the jungles of Palatine, and there might be some terrain advantages with the land of the Bosmer. So those are things, and the Nords would be well prepared to deal with like the winters of the Pale. You know, I think that if a foreign army tries to invade them with the difficulties of invading with the terrain of the mountains and the Sea of Ghost, they've got it golden. But, you know, if they are invaded by a foreign army that breaks through, like, it's Pale Pass, I believe, in the Gerald Mountains, and this army has established itself in Falkreath and it's marching north, Plains of Whiterun could be a bloodbath because there is nowhere to hide. Whoever's got the most mobility and who's got the biggest guns or fireballs is the one that's going to win. Their main strategy, I think, is just like, we're really muscular. We've got some really heavy weapons that we can lift like it's no big deal. And we have the power of the Thu'um, and we can ambush people. And that's well and good. Maybe they could do that. It's just, are they all going to become master sneak stealth archers like, you know, the main protagonist character does as like an obligatory easy way to get through the game? I don't think so. And I guess what I'm saying is, like, from a lore standpoint, it's not realistic to be in the middle of battle and drink a potion. And I wouldn't really expect that you drink a potion, your body's going to metabolize it instantly and it's going to heal you. Whereas I kind of would think that a magic spell of restoration with your mind might be acting quicker as far as healing your body. Maybe it wouldn't be perfect unless you're like really a master, but I do think it'd be more instantaneous, and I don't think you're going to be wielding a two-handed axe and be right next to a guy in hand-to-hand combat, and he's just going to give you the opportunity to give him that like opening where you're going to drink a potion and just get like 50 health back. You're going to instantaneously have all of the wounds he's done to you. I just don't think it's going to work. I think that he'll find the opening, you'll be distracted, you just don't have the time, you don't have the hands, and it's just not a realistic way of doing things. It exists in the game. Maybe in the lore it doesn't work like that. Maybe the potions are just something you have after battle, and you have your shield and your axe, and you rely on those things to try to win.